Hola clase. Hoy vamos a hacer tips for learning a world language. And so obviously either you took this course because you are interested in languages. There could be motivations because you had to take it. So I just want to give you tips for whatever your motivations are to make your life easier. So one who speaks only one language is one person, but one who speaks two languages is two people. This is a Turkish proverb. This is one of the reasons I love languages so much, because when I was learning Spanish, you kind of have to lose yourself and start all over again and build up your personality in a different language, because you're not going to know the words to do it right away. You kind of lose your personality. And in losing that personality, you become that different person as you learn that language. So I always say that American Bridget is different than Spanish Bridget, and Spanish Bridget would be me when I'm speaking Spanish, than French Bridget, because my personality evolves around the language that I know and how I can express myself. And so it's really incredible when you learn a different language that you have almost this alter ego. So I have this American persona, but when I speak in Spanish, I'm a little bit of a different person. And so that's where this comes from. And it can be really frustrating as well. So one of the things I always found challenging when I did studies abroad and I lived with families, if I didn't have the vocabulary to express how I was feeling frustrated or upset or sad, or I'm a really goofy person, I love to fool around, I didn't have the language skills to do that. And so I really felt isolated. And so I had to know that there's this time period where you can't really express what you want to because you don't have that skill set yet. And so it can be really frustrating. So, but in the long run, it's a really rewarding process. I love that I have a totally different personality in Spanish. But there's something else I wanted to introduce you to, and that's linguistic relativity. And these are some of the things that happen to you when you choose to speak another language. So when you speak another language, it's common to feel like a different person because language is closely tied to culture, identity, and communication styles. So different languages have unique ways of expressing emotions, ideas, and concepts, which can influence your thought, patterns, and behavior. Additionally, language is not just a means of communication, but also a reflection of cultural norms and values. So when you speak another language, you may unconsciously adopt certain cultural traits associated with that language, leading to a shift in your perceived identity. So the phenomenon is often called as linguistic relativity. And so I think that's really interesting to understand. Language, it's not just words, but it is something that is linked to your culture, identity, and the way you communicate. So one of the first things you can do to get good at a language is to work on developing an ear for this language. And what I mean by that is that you need to start hearing this language. So put on Spanish music. When you turn on your TV, put on the Spanish subtitles or put it in Spanish and read in English. You want to train your ear to hear these foreign sounds. And so the more you listen to it, the less foreign it will become. And so we're born being able to speak every single language. It's just that we rule out all those other syllables that aren't used for us. So if you only hear English, you're only hearing English syllables. And so we just have to expose our ear to that language we want to learn. And so if you're driving to work, you're driving to school, listening to Spanish, even if you do not know what it means, this is helping you overall. And so don't be afraid to turn on your favorite Spanish speaking artist. It's extremely helpful for picking up colloquial phrases, also just for learning the language. These are some really popular shows on Netflix that if you're interested, and this is what I love about languages, it really lends itself to all these different modes. And so if I want to learn, but I also can entertain by watching something, I can do that. So these are just a couple of recommendations that you can find on Netflix. La Casa de las Flores, it's a Mexican comedy drama. Narcos is Colombian, but half in English. Definitely recommend watching with Spanish subtitles if possible, all the time. La Casa de Papel is set in Madrid and full of very Madrid-specific colloquialisms. Colloquialisms is how we speak locally, right? And so when we're talking about bison chip dip, That's something that we know because we're from this area. That would be an example food-wise. Elite is also very Madrid specific. So that's what's so wild about Spanish, is that there's Mexican culture to learn, Colombian, Peruvian, how they live in Madrid compared to how they live in Barcelona is different. And so there are so many things for you to study, for you to be inspired by. It's just endless, but also can be overwhelming. And so Jugando con Fuego Latino, this is a reality show with the same concept as the English Too Hot to Handle, with contestants from Mexico, Colombia, Spain, Argentina. That's really great to hear how different people speak, their speech patterns, and what they would say with their slang. And so these are just a couple of recommendations for you. But also you could put your favorite show that you've watched 1,000 times in English, your favorite American show, and then change it to Spanish, because you know what's going to happen if you've seen it that many times. That really helps with understanding. And so there's a lot of ways that you can be practicing languages that aren't in the classroom. Again, with the música. So can you identify any of these artistas hispanohablantes? So any of these Spanish-speaking artists? Most of these right now are extremely popular in pop culture. One literally just came out with a new album, Debí Tirar Más Fotos. And so that would be Bad Bunny, él es de Puerto Rico. Anyone here? He's from Spain. His father was also a very popular artist, Enrique Iglesias. I am very fond of Enrique because his music was some of the first Spanish music that was played on the radio, and so that was always really exciting for me. So you have to understand, way back in the day, even in the early 2000s, Shakira and Enrique, they were crossover artists, so they would put their music in Spanish and English, and that was the only way it could get played on the radio. It wasn't until 2017 when we had a full Spanish song played on the radio. Because they didn't think that the Americans wanted to listen to it. So really interesting, the Latin explosion that was happening in the early 2000s with Enrique, Shakira over here. These two are more, now, I'm actually obsessed with Peso Pluma. They're from Mexico. They have taken mariachi music and classic music from different parts of music and mixed it with urban rap. I mean, it's just incredible that they've been able to take the traditional music and transform it into what we can use today. If you've never checked out Peso Pluma, do it. It's really... I was hooked on them for a long time. Rosalia, she's a Spanish artist that also uses flamenco music in a more traditional way in her music. And this one I was talking about before, Shakira, who was a huge part of the Latino crossover explosion in the early 2000s with J-Lo, when Spanish started to infiltrate our radio waves. So, all of these artists I recommend. Again, might not gonna be able to understand what they say right away, but in time, you'll be able to pick up and start listening, and your ear will start getting more familiar with those sounds. These are 3 travel culture experts that have always continued to inspire me when I found it difficult to continue with the language. If I was struggling with different concepts, or just, there's some days you wake up and you're like, have I studied this language at all? It's so complicated. I've always used culture to continue to inspire me with my language, so that when that was frustrating, I remembered why I'm doing it. These are my 3 favorite all-time culture travel experts. It's Rick Steves, Samantha Brown, and Anthony Bourdain. You can find their content all over YouTube, Netflix, and different places. But if you're really curious about the world, these 3 do a great job of inspiring and also disseminating information in a really interesting way. So definitely check out the cultural aspect. That's a huge motivation for me when I'm learning languages. Working on developing an ear. There's so many different apps that you can use. Duolingo obviously is really good for vocabulary retention and practice. This says Coffee Break French, but there is a Coffee Break Spanish. They're anywhere from 5 to 10 minute podcasts that review simple topics, or even get along further where you could just be listening to Spanish. I love that. This last one, Italki, is something that I started using most recently to get better at my French skills, and I love it. If I would have had this 20 years ago, I would have been in heaven. But basically, Italki, I can pay $10 and have a 30-minute lesson with a native French speaker or a native Spanish speaker. And really, for me, I learned by conversation, and so I need to be practicing in conversation. So the idea that I can click on this and have access to a native speaker where I can practice for 30 minutes. I mean, technology is mind-blowing. And so these are 3 apps that you guys can take advantage of for sure. Easy ways, if you're sitting waiting, you can pull these apps up and be practicing. Learning how to manage our time and using it appropriately will really help you be successful as well. If you can set anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes extra a day for you to practice your language skills. So if you're interested, and depending on if it's banned or not, I do have a TikTok, and I do different cultural things. I travel often to Spain and to other parts of the world as well. And so I have a lot of cultural content in Spain, Italy, France, the Netherlands. Also access to when I travel with my students for study abroad. So you guys can go check out and see what my students are doing when we go on our studies abroad as well. So it's Bridget Beeline. For as long as that is around. So that'll be interesting. But one of the things I have loved about TikTok, what really makes me sad if it goes away, I love the fact that I could be in Paris, France, listening to somebody speak French, and then I can swipe up and I'd be in Madrid listening to somebody speak Spanish. I've never had access to so many different types of languages. For me, that's so inspiring to be able to see these different ideas of living and, continue to strive to get better at my language skills. So check that out if it still exists. And, I really encourage you to make mistakes. That's how I've gotten a lot better at my language skills, is because I'm willing to rip off that Band-Aid, my shame, put it aside, put my ego aside. I do not have to be perfect. I will get to my destination with determination and hard work. And so if you do not put yourself out there, you're not going to be making the mistakes that you need to fix to get better. So make mistakes. That is a part of the process. That is a part of the journey. Use flashcards and be consistent. And again, practice speaking. I really thrive in my language skills when I have a native speaker or someone that's really good at speaking Spanish to practice with me, because I can put all those different parts together. So make mistakes, use flashcards, and be consistent, and practice speaking when you have the opportunity. And one of the last things to remember, failure is an opportunity to grow. You need that growth mindset. It can be really intimidating to speak a different language. Be mindful of the fact, usually when someone approaches you and English might not be their first language, what is your reaction to them? Usually you would probably be sympathetic or help guide them how to say it more correctly. And so my experience, when I speak to a French speaker or a Spanish speaker, they are just more delighted that I've taken the effort to speak their language, that they don't pay attention to my small errors, or they will fix my errors. And really, that takes a lot of courage to do that. So have that growth mindset. Don't be afraid to fail. Challenges only help you grow. Don't let your ego get in the way. Challenges are going to happen, but don't let your ego get in the way of your destination. Don't let these bumps trip you up. So if you really want to thrive, I always, I learned more in 2 weeks than I ever did in any classroom when I did my study abroad to Mexico, and then I lived with a Spanish family in Spain. This spring, I'm taking students to Amsterdam and Paris. The enrollment is still open, so if that's something that you're interested, the time is now. There's never a better time for you to invest in your education. Be inspired by the different ideas of living. Be inspired about what possibilities and job possibilities globally are out there. And so if that's something you're interested in, please contact me via email, and I will get you the information you need. So I hope you have a great day. Que tenga buen día. And I hope you put on some Spanish music after this. Ciao.